pray thee between me and thee, and between my herdmen and thy herdmen, for we are brethren. It was only when Lot left was Abram able to see all the land that was in front of him. During certain seasons, God will remove certain people from your life who you may be close with. Yet those people being in your life only hinder you from your potential and what God has called you to do. For it was only when the veil was lifted was Abraham able to see all the land before him. Interestingly enough, I didn't write this down, but interestingly enough, wait, hang on. No, my bad. I'm jumping the gun. Where was I? Yeah, it reminds me of that saying, you will not see the forest around you if you're focusing on the tree in front of you. Genesis 13:14 to 15 puts it like this. And the Lord said to Abram, after that Lot was departed from him, lift up now thine eyes, and look from the place where thou art northward, and southward, and eastward, and westward. For all the land which thou seest, to thee will I give it, and to thy seed forever. No, I didn't write this down, but there is something wonderful hidden in that passage that goes over a lot of people's heads. It definitely went over my head, and it's that Abram was standing in the land. He was standing in it, which means that he was standing in the promise as God was promising him said promise. He was already in it. He had already obtained it because God's word is good as done. God was promising him this promise and he was standing in it. He was standing in it. Which goes to show when God says his word, when God says a word, consider it done. Consider it done. My throat's really starting to hurt me. Let's move on to something more serious. The great and terrible distinction. There is a saddening difference here between Abram and Lot. And that difference is that they were heading in opposite directions. Abram was given Canaan, while Lot pitched his tent towards Sodom, the land of unspeakable sin. The difference between Abram and Lot is that Abram was given a promise that took hundreds of years worth of suffering, yet Lot ended up at destruction. This is another reason why God takes people out of our lives. Sometimes we will find ourselves in seasons like Abram, standing on the brink of a great promise, yet with a multitude of progress to be made, which means that the Lots in our lives have to be separated from us, but not only for our benefit, but that person might be heading towards destruction. I myself have been there on both ends, and I know others too, so they can testify to that. A great example I can give is a friend of mine who was in her first relationship. Woohoo, first love. You know the feeling. You know the feeling. It was not the healthiest relationship by any means, and I'm not saying this to judge, I'm just giving an example here. But with many conversations going back and forth, she came to the conclusion that it would be for the best if they went their separate ways. And he did not take it well. The guy did not take it well. The reason she called things off was due to the fact that they both had their emotional baggages to deal with. She wanted to focus on herself and overcome the traumatic past, but he wasn't ready to deal with his own. Eventually, oh man, I'm giving myself away, part-time therapist over here. We came to the conclusion that the relationship had been idolized in his eyes. We've spoken in great detail about idolization and the destruction it leads to. Best if they went their separate ways. In this situation, my friend was like Abram, willing to leave her tent and embark on the journey of healing, whereas Lot was like her partner, who pitched his tent towards Sodom. But, and that's a huge but sometimes it works the other way around. Sometimes you might be in the Lot season. You might just be like Lot, heading towards destruction because you need it. You need to leave Egypt. Your golden calves must be destroyed. So God will let you go through that season of destruction and suffering. He will tear you down. He will tear you down just so we can build you back up again. So it's all for your benefit. Now, I'm not saying that Sodom and Gomorrah were innocent, because obviously they did something so evil. God literally rained hell on them, and their sins aren't even directly mentioned. Not directly. Heavily hinted at. You know, we're told in Jude that it was pride, but we know it's more than pride. You know, that's just surface level stuff. So we're not exactly told what they did, but we can put the pieces together. The pieces are there. But God will make it all work out for your benefit in the end. You could even argue, this is a bit confusing, so stay with me here. You can even argue that Abram and Lot's seasons were one and the same because of the suffering that takes place. God did something similar with Job. He let Job go through it. God literally let him go to hell. He let the devil take everything from him, yet through faith and perseverance, he was blessed. God let Christ go through the same thing. When Jesus died, he was sent to hell to preach, and if it wasn't for this, then we would never have salvation. Mainly the destruction would be towards non-believers. And that's not me being overly self-righteous or religious. I'm speaking of my own experiences here. In my life, there have been people the Lord has used to prune me, to bring forth the person who he called me to be, which came with destruction. I had a land of promises right in front of me, yet it took ages to actually step into it, and it always seemed to be that the people who were living in Sodom seemed to be non-believers or people of the world, to put it sadly. Lot drifted towards Sodom and ended up being captured during the Battle of the Five Nations, which ended with Abram going to rescue his nephew. Oh, that rhymes, rescue. Okay, I could have gone into more detail here. I will, just not right now. If you know, you know, but I'm saving that. I'm saving it. I'm saving it for a special video. A video that deserved its own standalone top. Yeah, a topic that deserved its own standalone video. Character analysis, you feel me? If you know, you know, that's what I'm gonna say. If you know, you know, that's what I'm gonna say. But before we move on, note there that Lot drifted. That's important. I'm just going to touch on it quickly. That's important. Lot drifted towards Sodom. So Abraham gets him back, but then he ends up going back himself, which just goes to show that Sodom is an institution. It can institutionalize you, but I'm jumping the gun. I'm getting ahead of myself. That's for when we get to Sodom and Gomorrah. So let's move on to the promise. It was only after Abram saved Lot was he given this promise. I don't know if I'm looking into it too deeply, but this is why it was only after he saved Lot was he given the promise. And it even says at the start of chapter 15, after these things. So there has to be some connection to this, but I don't know what it is. We We do know that the Lord gives Abram the promise of a great seed and the land.